So the body's under attack. We lead to more deposition of fat among our muscle tissues. So that's intramyocellular lipids, means where fat, our muscle cells are being marbleized with fat and covered with this, and every cell in the body becomes more fats in the cell membranes, overly infiltrated with fat in the cell membranes, leading to more muscle weakness and more impaired energy production, leading people feeling chronically fatigued. And they'll feel lethargic. They don't feel like moving, exercise, activity, leading to, and that combined with nutrient depletion leads to more osteopenia and sarcopenia as they age. Sarcopenia means the loss of muscle strength and muscle density with aging. And that's a normal process of aging, is to lose bone and muscle, and to lose brain size and immune function. In other words, we deteriorate as we age. Our muscles get stronger, our muscles get weaker and smaller. Our bones get weaker and smaller. Our brain gets weaker and smaller. And that's neurological senescence. And our immune system gets weaker and stronger and smaller. We don't live forever. We get increased risk of getting an infection like pneumonia as our immune system deteriorates. So the purpose of living healthfully and the purpose of my nutritarian message is we want to derail and slow down these processes, maintain muscle and bone strength, maintain neurological size and function, and maintain immune system size and function, stabilizing stem cells, telomeres, and the ability to have that human lifespan be around 100 years old, not around 75 years old. So sugar, flour, SF, sugar, flour, IR, insulin resistance, the more the fat builds up around our cells, the more insulin resistant we become. In other words, the body's production of insulin isn't sufficient to keep the sugar to the most favorable level low enough. So the body has to produce more insulin to keep the sugar low, because the fat surrounding the cells distort the function of the insulin receptor. So now the higher level of insulin creates another factor leading to aging. Now, insulin is a primary fat storage hormone, so it drives up appetite. So when you're overweight and more insulin resistance, you're going to naturally have a bigger appetite that matches the size of your body. So an overweight, bigger person has a bigger appetite in proportion to the size of their body. So they're going to feel like eating more food because of the heightened production of insulin. And what drives that heightened insulin production is the high glycemic diet, the more sugar in the diet, and, of course, more fat on the body. So the glycemic, and by the way, insulin, not only being a fat storage hormone, it drives cellular replication. It's a factor that permissively allows cancer cells to replicate, and it promotes angiogenesis. The word angiogenesis means the growth of blood vessels to fuel the fat, because you can't grow fat on your body unless we have angiogenesis promotion, that blood vessels sprout new growth of shoots and branches and tributaries to bring oxygen and nutrients into the fat supply to grow fat on your body, allowing fat cells to replicate like a tumor. And in promoting the growth of angiogenesis, it also allows tumor cells to grow and even become cancerous, because now the tumors and the growth of abnormal cells can claim a blood supply through the angiogenesis promotion due to the heightened insulin. So glycemically unfavorable diets, meaning diets with a lot of sugar, honey, maple syrup, white rice, white bread, increase breast cancer rates by 85%. And that includes, white rice. Studies on high white rice consumption in Asian countries also show that more white rice in the diet, of course, increases risk of cancer, especially when people eat other causes of cancer on top of that, which we know, oils, fried foods, more sweets, animal products. It accelerates. So the more unhealthy things you combine into the witch's cauldron of cancer causation, the more likely you're going to have cancer. And the meta-analysis of 39 studies show increased risk of all common cancers with diets higher in glycemically unfavorable foods. So we're also saying here that gut inflammation means brain inflammation, and the gut and the brain communicate with each other. So the sweets and meat diet, in other words, meats and potato, meat and rice, meat and bread, the hamburger, the pizza, the way Americans eat, creates the growth of unfavorable and pathogenic bacteria and yeast forms in the gut. So let's just review this one more time, because the bacteria in the gut are an important part of our control of how much we eat, because it's the breakdown of fiber and resistant starch into short-chain fatty acids, SCFA. It's the production of short-chain fatty acids by the bacterial degradation of fiber and resistant starch that has feedback loops on both the appetite and the apostat. The appetite, so the fiber, these short-chain fatty acids, particularly butyrate, acetate, propionate, but particularly butyrate, activates the GLP-1 receptor, the same as those drugs do to stop gastric emptying, right? To slow gastric emptying, to make you feel full. And the butyrate also has a negative feedback loop with the apostat and the hypothalamus. So the gut and the brain communicate, and it registers how much food we're eating based on how much fiber we're eating and how much of these short-chain fatty acids are produced by the bacterial degradation of the fiber. And when we eat these various fibers and the assortment of various types of fiber, it builds the most favorable bacteria in the gut that creates this biofilm that covers the gut with favorable gram-positive organisms like bifidobacteria, but in any case, that slow the absorption of calories in the gut, and it particularly slow the absorption of glucose, lowering the glycemic load of your diet and lowering the caloric rush. So that means the calories enter the bloodstream more slowly when we eat these healthy fibers and have the right wide assortment of fibers that lead to the wide variety of different bacterial subspecies that are able to have live onto the villi and slow the absorption, and the support of those green vegetables and those phytochemicals support the growth of the aryl hydrocarbon receptors on the underside of the villi, supporting the growth of the intraepithelial lymphocytes, the immune system in the gut. So the immune system in the gut communicates with the bacteria in the lining of the gut, which then has an effect to produce nutrients and ease food gently into the bloodstream and to keep us feel like we're satisfied with a lower caloric load, and we're feeling better, and we're more instinctually now connected with the amount of calories we need, and we don't need to overeat. Keep in mind, Americans are consuming more than double the calories humans need. Primitive populations and healthy humans consume about, 1,400 to 1,600 calories a day. The average primitive societies consume about 1,500 calories a day, 1,600 calories a day. The average American consumes 3,300 calories a day. I make the joke and I say half of what we eat meets our needs and the other half meets the needs of our doctors. And it's almost impossible to be satisfied with a lesser amount of calories if we're not eating healthy foods and if we are eating these foods that drive addictive behavior, right? And the last thing on this slide says, shuts down gene silencing. It's just mentioning the damage to the immune system from gut inflammation and brain inflammation from this American diet, which we're consuming, the sweets and the meats at the same time, the flour and the meat and the cheese and the bread and all the stuff we eat. And so the glucose and insulin spiking suppresses immune function, suppresses surveillance, the immune system surveillance to remove abnormal cells and kill them or remove them, and it also stops gene silencing. Gene silencing is when the genes have abnormal areas that have to be suppressed. So we are what we eat. Our genes reflect what we eat. Our genes, to a lesser extent, affect our genetics because the abnormal genes are suppressed or silenced when we eat healthfully. So the brain's under attack, and what we eat affects our brain. It affects our behavior, gives us our intelligence, our compassion, and our attentiveness. So episodic high glucose, the caloric rush that overstimulates the dopamine centers of the brain, damages the brain and shrinks the brain. So the brain is going to shrink at a faster rate as we age if it's not continually exposed to antioxidants. So these lack of antioxidants from not eating berries and green vegetables and beans, and from the brain is not getting the antioxidants, meaning all the processed foods and animal products, it's going to deteriorate and lose its global function. And you're not going to be the best version of yourself, the most human, intelligent, and creative version of yourself. So poor diets, junk food diets, is also the poor school performance, hyperactivity, attention deficits, impairs higher BMI, means more fat on the body, impairs executive brain function, leading to higher rate of depression and less ability to concentrate and focus on your work long term. Now, oils make this work and make this worse, and I'm making the radical, almost ridiculous claim that olive oil causes breast cancer. Now, how can I make such a ridiculous claim that olive oil causes breast cancer? Well, it's not direct, it's indirect. It's because being overweight causes breast cancer, right? And if you eat more oil, you have more stimulation of the brain to not be satisfied with the right amount of calories had you been eating foods that, like nuts and seeds and beans, which lower your apostat. And by the way, all the oil that rushes into the bloodstream is 100% put into fat storage. When you eat nuts and seeds as a source of fat, some of that fat is sucked out into the toilet bowl. So the fat is not all biologically absorbed. So it gives your body the sensation like it ate 200 calories, but only, let's say, 170 calories came in. So it naturally, instinctually, without effort, makes you moderately calorically restrict because you're satisfied with less calories. The same thing when you eat beans is a source of carbohydrate, because the beans are the foods with the most resistant starch, and those starches are resistant to enzymatic degradation, which means they get converted by bacteria in the gut into short-chain fatty acids. But that happens so far down in the digestive tract towards the distal portion of our small intestines and the proximal portion of our large intestines that about 85% of those calories are passed through into the toilet bowl as fat. So the carbohydrate calories in beans, some of them are turned into fat by bacteria and hit more fat in the toilet bowl. More fat in the toilet bowl means less fat on you. But of course, it means that we have to get satisfied with those 200 calories, but those 200 calories never come into the body. Part of them went into the toilet. So it makes you moderately calorically restrict. This consumption of oil is brand new in human history. Nope, it's not a primitive food. It's not a natural food. It's a completely concocted, processed, and artificial food that our bodies are not adapted to. Now, when you heat oils, they become carcinogenic because we form, by the way, the toxic aldehydes are in the oil when they're heating and putting these toxins in the oil to extract them from the food, but they also, now we cook with the oil, we heat them further, creating more rancid compounds that are toxic. And even the fumes are carcinogenic. So even if you work in a movie theater over the popcorn machines where they're cooking that fake butter, or you're working in a fast food restaurant around the fryers, just breathing in the smoke off the fryers, could damage your lungs, and because even the fumes are irritating and carcinogenic. And the U.S. Southern diet, where they eat more fried foods, whatever they fry everything down there, right there, they call it the stroke belt because it has the highest heart attack and stroke rate in the world, not in the country, in the world. The most number of people dying of heart attacks and strokes is right here in the United States, where people eat more fried food. And the Sydney Diet Heart Study showed vegetable oils were more dangerous than red meat for your heart. So you cook in oil, you're cooking with one of the most dangerous things you could possibly eat. And of course, it's impossible to maintain a normal weight. I could tell story after story where people try to eat healthy, they try to diet, and they have one serving a week of like something with oil. And the minute the oil comes in, it stops fat storage for days. It stops fat breakdown for days. It turns on the fat storage, and you can't lose fat, break down fat, and build fat at the same time. You're either losing fat, stabilizing fat, or building fat. And if you turn on the messengers to cause build fat, you can't expect to lose weight, even if so it makes it so it discombobulates your body's whole ability to maintain biological normalcy. So I'm claiming here that we build up these toxic metabolites in the body from eating a diet that's not rich enough in antioxidants and phytochemicals and other nutrients, micronutrients. We build up these advanced glycation end products, meaning cooked carbohydrates, low nutrient cooked carbohydrates, and overly cooked foods. We have ammonia and aldehydes and all types of damaging substances in our body. And then we have external noxious substances from breathing in smoke, taking in chemicals, eating foods that are contaminated, or whatever, or just using things in our environment. So we have these xenobiotics, being exposed to mold, whatever it is. We have other things that are noxious in our external environment that adds to the toxic load that our own body produces. So we have different types of toxins. We have toxins that are metabolically produced by the body itself, the normal byproduct of living. We produce, in other words, our body produces waste products like free radicals, like lipofuscin, like advanced glycation. Our body produces waste. So that we have that buildup of those toxins that have to be removed. And then we have the toxins from the food we're eating, that we're not eating wholesome food. And then we also have the toxins from the external environment as well. And this leads to more abnormal cell surfaces. It leads to the immune system being able to recognize the cells as having noxious waste in them, which can distort the shape or function of the cell membrane. It could lead to an attack, an autoimmune attack on our own self, and the body, the immune system can recognize itself as being abnormal and attack it. So we have become hypersensitive and more inflammation. And by the way, because fat cells on the body in general get a poor blood supply, they naturally secrete more pro-inflammatory compounds because they're not getting as well oxygenated. So fat cells secrete more lipokines and cytokines and more reactive oxygen species, which then contribute to the person overreacting with an autoimmune condition, or overreacting should they get a viral infection, or having death from COVID now because the body was so toxic and so has such a pro-inflammatory state.